Mr. Sani? Mr. Casanova? Here. Mr. Matu?
Yes.
Mr. Medina?
Here.
Mr. Kulik?
Here.
Mr. Farrar?
Here.
And Mr. Trucco?
Yes.
Ms. Trucco?
Mrs.
Or-
Trucco.
If you don't mind, we'll stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I just want to thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Bingo. So we don't have any minutes to approve. This is our first meeting, and the first order of business will be to elect the chair and vice chair before we get into the introductions. So you need to elect a chair and a vice chair. That would be the first order of business. I don't know if you know each other, or but one of you would nominate a chair and one of you would, and then you'd nominate a vice chair, and so.
I nominate John Medina.
Do you have a second? Second. Okay. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Right. And then vice chair.
What are the responsibilities? Well, I'm happy to be vice chair.
I nominate you the chair.
Okay, so Ms. Trucco has been nominated. Do we have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Matu. All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, we have a chair and a vice chair, and what we'll do is we'll get name tags and positions, titles for you at the next meeting. All right. So again, I'm Steve Olmsted, Planning Director for the Village of Pinecrest. It would be helpful if each of you could introduce yourselves.
I'm Doug Kulig. I have a firm in town, OBMI, practicing architect and planner. Lived in Pinecrest since '84. Sorry, I'm Doug Kulig. I have a firm here in town called OBM International, architect and planner, and I've lived in Pinecrest since '84.
I'm Ronnie Mateo Architecture, practicing in Miami since 1980, and I have lived in Pinecrest before Pinecrest was Pinecrest.
I am Jose Casanova. I am an architect and urban planner. Lived in Pinecrest before Andrew, and was part of the helped Pinecrest to adopt work with the Dade County in order to help the formation of Pinecrest, and also contribute that the commercial area of Pinecrest is part of Pinecrest because of my recommendation.
And I'm John Medina. I'm going to hold my breath and you can see my face. Recognize me around there. Without it, you know who I am. I'm a resident. Been here for about 10 years. Practice architecture, consult for at least, been involved in architecture and consulting for at least 35 years, and happy to serve the community. So.
Like that. My name is Victoria Trucco. I studied architecture, did a master's in landscape architecture, have been doing landscapes in Pinecrest since 1995. We are landscape contractors.
And my name is John Farrar. I'm a landscape architect. I've been here since 1964. And I practice landscape architecture here in Pinecrest, Coral Gables, and Coconut Grove, mainly residential homes.
Well, thank you. And I know we have Mayor Corradino and former Mayor Cindy Lerner and Council Member Tim McDonald with us. I think the mayor would like to say a few words.
Thank you. I'll stand over here because I wanted to address everybody. I just wanted to welcome everybody to this, and I wanted to thank you all for being here. I think this is a really important job that we're doing here in Pinecrest. The reason that we started this was to carry on from the US1 vision plan that we had put together about 10 years ago. And we wanted to advance that. I thought we did a lot of it. We're under pressure from Miami-Dade County a lot over the years about all types of things, eastward hoe, population growth, the county's growing. We thought in we know this, and we thought in Pinecrest that what we need to do for a couple of reasons is one, explore diversity in housing stock. And I'll get back to that in a second. We looked at the US1 corridor. We know that the shopping centers are starting to turn over and sell and will eventually come to be redeveloped. And we thought, okay, maybe we know that the people don't, the people in Pinecrest don't necessarily eat here or shop here or get entertained here. They go a lot of times to other places. And when these redevelop, we may need to upgrade that. We may need better urban design when we get to it. And then we've got a rapid transit system that's coming in, a $300 million investment that we need to support to the extent that Pinecrest wants to support it. One of the reasons we thought about the diversification of the housing stock was the fact that the county's always come in and said, hey, we want to put all the population growth within a half mile of the US1 corridor. And I thought what we should do is explore not doing that. I mean, it's always to have this threat of our single family homes being zoned or land use to 100 units an acre, or 125 units an acre, something like that. So I thought maybe the trade-off would be draw a hard line on the back of the US1 commercial corridor on the east side, and any of the new residential would not impact directly the single families. You push it into the commercial area. So we've always said, and I referenced to Mr. Steinbauer's home because I've been out there 1,000 times, we don't want commercial intrusion into the residential neighborhoods, but maybe different. Push the residential into the commercial. So I thought that we should have a community conversation about that. And at a certain point in time, April of last year, the county came through with this rapid transit zone proposal, which again suggested that they put a high density, 125 units an acre, 250 units an acre, and high heights, 16 stories to 25 stories, a half a mile into the neighborhoods. That was totally unacceptable. So we fought with them back and forth for quite a while, and just the other day we've got confirmation that they've essentially dropped that. They're going to let us control the land use and zoning. They're not going to make us do or conform to densities or intensities, and they're letting us, or densities and heights. They're letting us exempt single-family neighborhoods from anything that we do. They just mandate that we come back with a plan within 2 years, and that's what this may be the seeds of. And so what my real concern is that we have no time frame to do this. I mean, we want to get something to them in 2 years. We have no preconceived notions of what we want or what we don't want. I think what our task with you all and Steve and the consultants is to objectively examine all the issues that we can. We'll have a community conversation about it. We'll put common set of facts on the table. We'll debate them as a community, and if it's a good enough, we'll come to a consensus. If it's a good enough idea to move forward, we'll move forward. If it's a good enough idea not to. But your committee represents probably the technical people within Pinecrest who wanted to go through this examination. So I really thank you for taking this on. It's critically important to Pinecrest, and we have to have the conversation, and we will. But we just want to make sure that we are all on the same page as we move forward. So that's enough of me. Thank you. I'll sit to the back and let you do your jobs.
Thank you. Also wanted to introduce Michelle Hammontree, our communications manager. She's with us, and Adam Pascal, and we have our consultants, Matthew Hagee and Melissa Hagee, and Matt Manda, an architect. They're a consulting firm that we hired to help us in this process. Obviously, as the mayor has just indicated, the primary purpose of the committee is to update the Pinecrest Parkway US1 vision plan that was prepared in 2012, so that's 10 years ago. You each have been given an electronic copy. If you'd like a paper copy, let me know and I'll make sure that we get one to you. But since that time, there are a number of recommendations in the plan, a number of objectives, and improvement occurs step by step, slowly over the course of years, but we have implemented a number of the strategies and goals of that 2012 plan. We require wider landscape buffers adjacent to commercial redevelopment now. We require better landscaping and native landscaping we have planted native landscaping in the median of US1, including slash pines and other native plants. We've reduced the maximum permitted height of signs adjacent to Pinecrest Parkway from 30 feet to 15 feet. We have a uniform color palette that we try to enforce when possible. There's a color palette within this plan that was adopted. So we do pay attention to architectural design and styles and require compliance with this plan to the extent that we're able to, and we've been largely successful. There are preferred architectural styles: Old Florida vernacular, Caribbean colonial, Key West vernacular, and other improvements have been implemented. Not all of them, but it's largely been successful. But it's 10 years old, and a lot's happened in the last 10 years, including the investment that the mayor just talked about, including new stations that will be built at Southwest 104th Street and Southwest 136th Street. So the Village Council began looking at this plan, and there was an ordinance. All of a sudden, I think we started working on our plan update before the county came out with a proposed ordinance, and that ordinance, as the mayor indicated, would have allowed mixed-use residential and commercial development up to 36 units, up to 60 units per acre in the first quarter mile east of US1, and then 36 units per acre in the second quarter mile, which would have had a dramatic impact on the character of the village of Pinecrest. But the League of Cities and the mayor, who was head of the League of Cities, worked in close cooperation with the county, and they revised their proposal and came out with a much more recent proposal just last week. And I think the communities have provided comments, and they're continuing to work on that ordinance, so we'll see what happens. But in any event, there are changes that are occurring in Pinecrest Parkway, and so this is a perfect opportunity to revisit the Pinecrest Parkway US1 vision plan. We began preparation of a plan, working with some consultants that coordinated an effort called Inspire Pinecrest. You may have seen that at Pinecrest Gardens in the Banyan Bowl in January. Quite a bit of work went into this in terms of polling community residents' opinions and working with an architect and working with an economic development specialist and others. But it became evident that what this plan lacked was architectural renderings of a high quality to illustrate some of the plan recommendations. So a lot of residents, you can talk about heights and densities, but unless you have really good renderings and have the expertise that you'll provide with the consultants to illustrate those plan recommendations, I think it was somewhat confusing. And I think Mr. Casanova and Mr. Medina came up to me at that meeting and suggested that that's what we needed to do, and the Village Council certainly understood that. And so we hired a consulting firm, and they appointed you as a committee to oversee this process. But that having been said, yes, there was a lot of discussion about heights and densities, and we got bogged down in that, and those are important. But the plan obviously addresses and looks at other things beyond just heights and densities. So the goal of the committee should be to look at Pinecrest Parkway from a fresh perspective. What are the problems? What are the issues? What improvements would you like to see made? And update this plan to the extent that you think is necessary in terms of what you're going to recommend to the Village Council. So with that, the village has retained the services of MHCP CoLab project consultants, and the consultants are here this evening, 3 members of the team: Matthew Hagee, Melissa Hagee, and Matt Manda, and they have prepared an outline of the project that they're going to be involved with, and they'd like to present that to you. And after that, the committee is free to discuss this and provide direction. Then we'd like to establish a schedule for further meetings, etc. and then have an opportunity for questions and answers from the public that are here. So with that, I'll turn it over to, before I turn it over to the consultants, this graphic here, you know, you've heard a lot about the North Pinecrest Business Alternative District, and this was in that initial plan. There are 3 areas that are termed North Pinecrest Business Alternative District that allows for mixed-use development at 4 stories and 12 units per acre. There isn't anybody that's taken advantage of those regulations, but it is an overlay district that exists adjacent to Kendall Drive, east of US1 obviously, and then where Dateland Gator Plaza is, that's another area that's been defined as North Pinecrest Business Alternative District. And then all of the commercial properties on the west side of the Palmetto Expressway on-ramp. And those areas here are shown in blue. Those are existing. And with the scheduled construction of new bus stations at 104th and 136, we looked at those properties, and consistent with the county's recommendations or their designations for more intensive development, we thought, you know, that it would make sense to expand the North Pinecrest Business Alternative Districts, reclassify them as the Pinecrest Business Alternative Districts, not just North, and then expand them into these yellow areas here. One would be adjacent to the one at the north. There's multifamily residential to the east, and then have a center at 104th Street and 136th Street, which is developed right now with Home Depot, Bank of America, and other projects. But just for reference purposes, I wanted to give each of you a copy of this, if I could. So, and we'd be happy to get any other graphics that you'll need throughout this process. So, I'll turn it over to the consultants. Yes, sir.
It says here, rules of conduct and engagement. So, since we sort of met here today, can we communicate with one another outside of meetings here, or is that an acceptable thing for this advisory meeting to get together after?
That's a good question. I know the zoning board and the village council, they discuss business only in public meetings. So you shouldn't be talking and making plans and recommendations outside of the meeting.
But this is not a public meeting, right?
Excuse me?
I mean, is this a public meeting?
It's a public meeting, it's not a
It's
public
not a public
hearing.
hearing.
It's not a public hearing, but it is a public meeting.
So,
I'll get clarification
I
for you.
feel like we can.
Let me get clarification from our attorneys, and I'll send that out to you tomorrow by email.
Okay, I would like to expand a little bit on my background.
Okay?
Just a follow-up question. So, because this group here is kind of creative and they get ideas in the middle of the night sometimes, and I just want to say share. You know, there may be that occasional phone call that I might make to someone here and say, what do you think about this? Does this make sense? I don't think it's anything, you know, that mysterious. It's just creative.
Right, of course.
We're going to be involved in somewhat of a creative process.
And I think talking one individual to another shouldn't be a problem, and I would just recommend at each meeting you divulge any discussion and contacts you've had with each other. But I will get you clarification on that and send you an
We
email.
may not be able to contain ourselves from meeting to meeting. We just need
We are not elected officials or anything like that, so.
We are volunteers.
We have no teeth here, basically,
Yeah.
except our opinions.
Yeah.
But eventually you will be recommending action on a plan that will be developed. But again, I'm not an attorney. I'm just in general, I think it would be helpful if you divulge conversations and contacts at each meeting and not meet as a group. You can't meet more than a couple of you together, one-on-one.
So we're not politicians. I think this young lady over here wanted to comment. She had her hand up.
The mayor, Cindy Lerner.
Hi. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was trying to get the mayor's attention. It's my understanding that this is an advisory committee that will be making recommendations based on your expertise and your appointment. And if so, it's my understanding that any committee like this that will be advisory to the council must operate under sunshine laws, which means you cannot talk to each other than in public meetings. Of course, the village attorney needs to guide you, but in the past, we made sure that any committee understood what the sunshine law meant and how seriously you can get in trouble for violating the sunshine laws. So it's beyond.
Well, let's do this. Since the lawyer's not here, what we're going to do is get an opinion. There are different types of committees, some that are subject to the sunshine rule and some that aren't. And if your preference is to not to be subject to the sunshine rule, we'll give you the options to what type of that committee it is, and then you guys, can discuss that and make a recommendation whether you want to be that type of committee or not. But since we don't have the lawyer here and we don't know, we'll ask the attorney, and there are options whether you can be or not, how you behave, and we'll deal with that. Mr.
I happen to be an attorney, and I just checked it out. There is an Attorney General opinion 98-13 of 1998, and Cindy is correct, Barr, there. If you're an advisory committee and you're making recommendations to the council as you would, this AGO opinion says sunshine does apply.
Okay, so let's get the attorney to opine, and if they decide they want to be more or less of a sunshine committee than more, and maybe they don't make recommendations to the council, it's a different type of thing. I mean, they're going to do their work. It's all being done in the public. But I think, let's get the options on the table. Let's not bog ourselves down in the first day with bureaucracy. Let's go to work and make this a productive thing, and we'll get you the answer and the options in the next day or so, if you don't mind.
And certainly on every agenda, there'll be an opportunity to discuss whatever you'd like to include on the agenda. And you'll have every opportunity to discuss at length anything related to the Pinecrest Parkway corridor that you want to in these meetings. So,
would you be developing the agenda, or would we be communicating with you for the...
You'd be communicating with
you directly?
Yes.
Okay.
And with regard to rules of conduct, etc., there are other notes here, but I anticipate that the meetings are going to be conducted very orderly, and I don't need to probably review this with you. So we just ask that any questions and comments from the public be reserved to the upcoming question and answer period at the end. People keep their comments, be brief, and I don't know how long you want to go on this evening, but our thought was that we should probably adjourn after 1.5 to 2 hours so you guys can go home and have dinner and enjoy the rest of your evening. But Matt and Melissa will talk about their project schedule and the meeting schedule and frequency of meetings going forward.
Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. Let me know if you need me to speak up. We're really excited to be here tonight. We worked in Pinecrest 10 years ago on the strategic plan, and so really happy to be back with us tonight. I'm just going to introduce myself, the team, let you know a little bit about our experience so you can get to know us a bit. I'm going to talk to you about the approach and the schedule, and then we can have a little bit of a discussion. But just so you're clear, this is the team. My name is Melissa Heggie. I'm a certified planner with 23 years of experience, actually now almost 24 years of experience, working in South Florida. I'm the lead planner on the project. Our firm is MHTP Collab. We do transportation, planning, zoning, and outreach. And for this particular project, we'll be doing the community engagement, the visioning, and looking at the zoning and the land use. With us is Matt Heggie. He's a director, and he will be leading the community outreach effort. We also have Matt Manda from MKSK. MKSK is a firm, he's based out of Orlando. They'll be leading the visioning, so they'll be doing all of the visualizations, a lot of the analysis of the buildings and the design, the open space, and he'll be showing some of his work as well. And the rest of the team, Brad Strader, who's a transportation planner, Brenda Diaz-Flores, who is originally from Miami, worked here as an urban designer, Luis Rivera Calvo, who is also an urban designer, as well as Anthony Prince, who specializes in environmental design, graphic design, signage, that kind of thing. So this is just a chart that we put together. It shows collectively we have over 29 different projects that we've worked on that have similar attributes to this project. So we're focusing on community engagement, zoning, comp planning, transportation, as well as visioning, rendering, and public open space. So our firm focuses on zoning and transportation. So these are some of the projects that we've done recently. Work in Miami locally, Cutler Bay, looking a lot at everything that we do. We like to understand the zoning, the development potential, understanding the landscape of the project. Oops. And then also outreach and public relations is a really important part of what we do, and messaging and communicating very clearly so that everybody understands the approach and the process and the intention. And this is some work that we did in Little Havana, a project we did in Lafayette, Louisiana, some work we've done in West Palm Beach with permitting, and Wynwood. And then this is the project that I alluded to at the beginning. So we did work on the strategic plan for 2010, and one of the things that came out of that was preserving the character and really looking at a visioning opportunity for US1 and having a conversation of what it should be like, what should it look like, so that you could have a future vision, you could protect the character that you have, and be very clear about what your expectations were. Matt?
Thank you, Melissa, and thanks to be here tonight. Nice to see all of you. Our team, MKSK, what we're going to be focused on, as Melissa said, is the visualization and the study of the different scenarios along the corridor. So 3 key things that we're going to be looking at, but not limited to, is the idea or the strategies around developing urban infill, right? And some of the graphics you see here are from various projects that we worked on throughout the country. But the idea is to look at each area along the corridor and study the different options as far as what's the right development criteria for those pieces, again, along the corridor as it relates to the districts. The next thing that we're going to look at is connectivity and access. That's really important. It's important both from a vehicular standpoint and also a pedestrian standpoint. Anything that we do from a development standpoint, we want to reinforce or improve the ability of connectivity and access. So that's going to be a chief thing that we're going to be studying. As well as community character and placemaking. Melissa was talking about some of those aspects. We're going to be looking at both architectural standards, landscape standards, materiality. We're going to be looking at how do we create great open space and ensure that whatever development happens, that you have good quality open space at the end of the day.
Okay. We're just talking about a little bit about the approach and schedule. So we understand the key aspect of this project is really protecting the village's character, and so we see that as 3 different components. The first is clarifying the process, so understanding the history of where this started, where we are now, and where we'd like to be, because there's lots of layers of information and different efforts that have happened, and we want to make sure that everybody understands the role and the opportunities and from where we started. The second is understanding the zoning and the zoning opportunities in the context of transit, because this vision plan update is an opportunity to look at the station areas that the county has identified at 104th Street and 136th Street to begin to look at what the village's future could be. And then finally exploring and visualizing the different scenarios. So once we've done our analysis, we really want to understand what these things can look like. And so we created a 3-phase approach to our work: discovery, drill down, and design. So discovery is really looking at the existing conditions, beginning with the stakeholder interviews, talking with council, talking with a variety of people to really understand the framework and the context of what's happening. The drill down is when we start to analyze all of that data, understanding the zoning, understanding the land use, understanding all the things that are happening at the county level, and then starting to fold in some of those visualizations and the modeling. And then the third is design. So once we've done our visioning sessions and we're really clear about where we want to go, then we would design the recommendations, design the booklet for adoption. And then the schedule is between 4 and 6 months. It really depends on how our work goes. And we do see a visioning session happening towards the middle of the project with updates to council several times throughout the process. And these are the key deliverables. So we envision that we'd like to meet with the committee with each deliverable. So when we do the discovery report, which will be it will show the case studies, it will show existing conditions and starting to look at some of the critical issues we'd like to map, and so we would present that to you. At the next meeting, we'd like to really go over the talking points and the communications, so it's really clear what is it that we want to do, what is it that we want to communicate, and how are we going to go about our work. Because really, we were talking with Steve Olmsted about this, is that you're really the ambassadors of the project as the committee. So we want you to be able to talk about it in the community. If you're at the grocery store, if you run into a neighbor, we want you to be able to feel comfortable about discussing it. And so by having the strategy and the talking points, it'd be very clear so that you can communicate what it is that we're doing. We're going to prepare a summary matrix, so to look at all of the different concepts and the ideas and the key objectives so that we can start to compare how they line up with the objectives. We'll also come to you with the visioning and build-out scenarios, and those will show the different options. That will happen before the visioning session and then during the visioning session and after. Once we get the input from the visioning session, we get the input from the council, we get the additional input from you, we'll start to build the draft plan and the final plan, and there'll be different opportunities to provide input on that. And then of course you'll have inspiring renderings that will really show you what the different concepts will look like and the concept that is ultimately selected and then developed into the recommendations. So that's really the extent of the presentation. We just wanted you to have a chance to ask us questions, to have a discussion. If the community has any comments as well. We'd just love to hear from you and what you're looking to get out of the process and what excites you about the project. So we'll hand it back to you all.
My questions are going to be basically in relation to my experience, of course. I worked for the City of Miami Planning Department for over 32 years as a neighborhood planner for 2 mayors, for Little Havana and Arapara, with a population of approximately 140,000 people. I worked during many comprehensive plans and other special land use, zoning analysis, development architectural review board, design standards, etc. Also, as a private consultant, worked for the Inter-American Development Bank in the Caribbean, Trinidad and Tobago, doing some planning studies and architecture. And basically, we would like to have an opportunity, at least from my perspective, to review all these studies and have meetings with the consultant before you start the process. I don't know if that is possible. So we have our feedback before you begin to work. I don't know if that
Yeah,
approach it.
it's a little hard, sorry. It's a little hard for me to hear. I don't, but I think what you're saying is that you want to have input
Before
in
you
the
start.
process.
Yes.
Right. So yes, of course, that's your role. So what, tonight, if you want to share some ideas, that would be wonderful. We'd like to do a follow-up meeting in about 2 weeks. I know that's really soon, but we're sort of working on a fast time frame, if you will. We can slow that down if the committee prefers that. But at the next meeting, we really want to present with you. Maybe Matt, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, hi. So Matt Hagee here. A couple things that I think we should address tonight, and very much the intent for this evening is to set in motion the process. And we want to get together, get to know each other, and very much say, here's the road path that we're going on. And so to the project schedule, we anticipate, and we've spoken to Mr. Olmsted about this as well, is that we'd like to return to you all on June 20th and have a meeting that very much will go into the heart of the matter. We will get very clear to the communications and talking points as it relates specific to the project from all sides of the conversation and all sides of the ordinances, as well as the policies that are in place to represent that. And we'd like to use that meeting to get into the very much the informational part of that, so that we all as a group are very clear together of what is required and what is needed, and that past history and is already in place. So that's really the effort for that next meeting. It's in our mind, it's not the effort for tonight. And for tonight, it's to very much open up the opportunity to get to know each other and have the discussion, and then return back with very much the clear talking points and the communication strategy that we all come together on and understand, so that we can collectively work together on the project to be successful with it. We will also have some FAQs there, so that we can all get into these, these acronyms and understandings and some of these relevancies to the way codes and things are written, so that we're all clear in understanding what is required of the project itself. Go ahead.
So I would like to get that presentation sent to all of us. And I wanted that when you explained that you're going to say of all the sides, how does, we are all residents, how the owners of all these land, these developers, the people that own the land, how are they represented, or they tied into these conversations? Do they have lobbyists that are going to be touching my door and asking, vote like this or vote like that?
There's a whole approach to that.
We don't
have to discuss that together. And that's what really that next meeting is all about, right? So what I rather, that's really the schedule. The schedule is to go back and return in 2 weeks very quickly. We will definitely give you the materials today. And obviously there's access on the city's websites of all the documentation of the previous studies, right? So that's really the reading material. If we get everybody up to speed and everybody can kind of know where we are now and how did we get here, we can quickly go into that type of conversation, because that is the outreach effort, right? So we have an effort there as part of this project to make sure that we communicate that out into the community, the business community, the civic associations, the homeowners associations as well. All that information has to be dispersed, if you will, in a clear way, so that we as members of this group can articulate it and communicate it together. We all need to be on the same page. And I don't think that's the approach for tonight. There's no reason that we should be on the same page until we have done all the work together to get up on the same page. So I definitely recommend looking at previous studies and all the background work that's been done in the village to come up to that. And I'm sure you have, but I would think that would be the time to do that.
So just a few thoughts, right? Everything for today is going to pretty much be new business, right? So we're going to be approaching this thing in the sort of traditional method of what we get accomplished today and what we're going to be leaving behind. And I think that this group over on this side is kind of the same group that's on the other side. because we live here, right? And so we're sensitive to the architectural aspect of this, as well as the current living condition. And those owners that we have to sort of look after that are along the corridor. I want to say that I tend to agree. Your first name is
Jose.
Hey, Pepe, Jose. So I agree with Jose that I think that we want to share with you our ideas. Maybe today is not the venue for that, and we have to get on board. Some of my questions are very simplistic. Okay, maybe even just primitive, but you know. You started the conversation. I'm sure you got enormous experience. That's why you're here. This is the best city at least we think it's the best city here in Miami-Dade County. We just want to prove upon it, right? And we want to make sure that your background sort of fits in with what we're intending to see, the better improvement of our little community here. So, could you, very simple. You gave an example of Cutler Bay. Could you just tell me a couple of other locations that you may have done some of this kind of work? I've seen you guys have done, if you have been involved in some of the work back in that area, I think some of that stuff is really good. And then the other thing that I was curious is whether you guys were involved in the initial studies here, or you're starting from scratch, kind of like we are. And that's, you know, very easy and simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so, you know, I've been doing this for 23 years at different scales. worked on the master plan for Midtown Miami. We've worked on projects in Wynwood. Now we're working in Little Havana. My specific background is working with architects. I smile because it's like a special place in my heart for architects. But through that effort, really gaining a very good understanding of the relationship of planning to development in terms of buildings and parking and open space and all of that. So that's throughout, the resume of my career, and you can look on our website and see all the work that we've done. You can look at my resume and see, my specific expertise. The only project that we've been involved in Pinecrest was the strategic plan for 2010. We are involved in other parts of the SMART plan, so we're working right now on a little study on the North Corridor for the Mobility Hub. We have some work in Little Havana that intersects with the Flagler Corridor, and we're also doing some work in Broward County in a rail project. And all of those things is kind of understanding how the station fits in with the community, and so understanding the existing zoning, really understanding the federal government's criteria, right? Because they have a certain set of requirements that they would like to see in terms of the transit and the transit that they fund. Understanding the county's desire and sort of their obligation in meeting the requirements of these grants and this funding. And then understanding the municipalities, because most of our experience is working with municipalities and sort of protecting the character and what's special about that place. So we understand all the different aspects of it, but really our job is to represent the community of the village of Pinecrest and sort of work within these other agencies so that the vision that we all develop for you is something that is implemented and adhered to.
Melissa, the work you're doing kind of in the South Florida area, in Broward and something, are they mostly associated to the rapid transit corridors? That kind of work generally where you're interfacing residential and the
It's a range of work. So we do have a lot of transportation work.
Okay.
We do a lot of outreach work. some work in Hollywood Beach, for example, with public-private partnership there. Yeah.
Can I ask a question following the chairman's train of thought? You showed a slide, and you mentioned it just now, that you are here to try to protect the character of Pinecrest. What is that in your view?
In my view? Well, I think it's really up to you all to tell us. I mean, we have an idea. You know, I've lived here for over 20 years in Miami-Dade County. So I have my idea of what Pinecrest is, but it's really not for me to tell you, it's for you to tell us. I see it's a very high quality community with excellent services, excellent schools, parks, sort of the history of Pinecrest Gardens and the coral rock and the oolite rock and the greenery and the landscape. I think is really special and unique to the county. The biking community, the farm stands, sort of the rural, suburban character, I think, and a lot of it comes from the natural landscape, in my opinion, but we're really looking for you to, you know, tell us. We don't want to come here with a preconceived notion, but that's our initial sort of.
And the study that you've done there, and this is conversations you know, if you'd like, you could just relax and sit down. I don't want this to become a we're talking at you, all right? And I don't think that any of us here want to feel that way. I anticipated this was going to be more of a round table kind of thing, and we're going to sit across from each other and just talk through some of these things. Okay, so you know, these venues sometimes get a little bit stiff and stuffy, and I suspect that you like the creative process as well. We're all here because we see that where we're probably going is transformational, right? And we see those things that I think that you've seen for the last 20 years as you've driven down this road, that we would like to see improvement, right? So it's transformational, right? It's not going to stay a sleepy little town forever. I think we can all probably agree that more than likely isn't going to happen. And so as we move forward, and you have experience, right? We would like to see how you've perhaps have made those massing or geometrical kind of changes to a city over time, you know, because this growth will happen through time, and to motivate people to come here that are interested in this type of quality growth, right? We don't want the sort of sporadic thing. So we hope that I understand that Mr. Mateo is you know, he's probing, right? But I don't want you to get caught up in that. If you say something wrong, it's wrong, all right? I want you to open up, and because this is what this is for.
And I wasn't asking a trick question, by the way. I am curious, as an outsider, I'm assuming you don't live in Pinecrest.
No, we live in Pinecrest.
But not an outsider from outside. Right. I mean, he's from Orlando, so he's an outsider. My question is based on the fact that having been here before Pinecrest was formed, you know, Pinecrest is a city by all definitions, etc., but it's sort of and I don't want to say this in a negative way, it's sort of a made-up city because it doesn't have a town center, it doesn't have a core, it has more of a linear kind of answer, so it's a very unusual kind of set of circumstances. And then what I think you mentioned as the character of Pinecrest was all the things that we all love about living in the big suburban sort of lots, opposed to you know, living over restaurants, etc., in a more urban condition. So Pinecrest is sort of a not urban. I mean, and it's being almost forced to become that. So how does that? So I was curious to find out if, as someone looking in from outside, what the character that you see here. Because it's not like any other, it's not like the city of Miami and how it was created, and it's not like Tampa, and it's not like some of the other great cities around. They've been built over the years and grown, and natural things have happened. Here, we sort of like said, okay, these are the boundaries. We have a new city. We collect taxes now and all this stuff. So it's kind of an interesting problem, I think, that we are dealing with here. Right. That was why I asked the question.
So if I could comment, I mean, Pinecrest is just 26 years old and will continue to evolve. I started my career in Orange County, Florida, Orlando in 1983. And it's hard to believe that that's almost 40 years ago. And I've worked for a number of different communities, affluent communities, with very intelligent, creative residents and very engaged council members and the like. But I can tell you, I've wrestled with this question for the last 12 years I've been in Pinecrest. What makes Pinecrest so unique and special? Because it is, of all the communities that I'm familiar with, it is on another level. And I still don't know exactly. It must be the village council, it must be the residents, it must be the history and the established character, and the staff that the village has hired. I'm not sure what goes into it, but it is a very unique community. And I often tell developers, they'll come and say, well, we own a 2-acre lot and we'd like to rezone it and put townhouses on it. I go, yes, yeah, you can apply. You can ask the village council to rezone it, but it would be totally inconsistent with their comprehensive plan. And Pinecrest is unique in the fact that in Miami-Dade County, this is just my opinion and I'll stop it. In Miami-Dade County, if you want, there's something for everyone. And yes, the corridor is congested, it's changing, it needs to be improved. But within Pinecrest, you have, I think, a unique product in a very intense, in an urban environment, and that is the large, low-density, single-family residential character that exists on the eastern part of the village, and then higher density, but still fairly low in density residential development. That coupled with a very high level of services, public services, just, and excellent administration and village council and management, I think, is second to none. But that's my opinion. But as planners, we appreciate what you have, and we'll certainly work with you too, and make recommendations to the village council with regard to preservation and enhancement of that. That having been said, we know that Pinecrest Parkway does need to be improved. That's why we're here. So.
I think Victoria has.
Yes, I would like, the Miami-Dade is making, instead of I-95, connecting Homestead to Dadeland, to connect to what they're doing is all these big, fancy, I read, could you explain to us, what are they doing? Because what I read is they're doing like 3 buses together, or 2 buses together, but just what they have now, which is a bus that comes from Homestead to Metro Dade. They're basically without people. But basically when they get there, they're gonna get bicycles and go around. Could somebody explain what is Miami-Dade doing to improving the traffic? That they're fast traffic, what are they doing? Could you explain that?
Maybe the mayor can explain that.
I'll start off, and then Mr. McDonald, who sat on the League of Cities Transportation Committee and the National League of Cities, I think, as well, is probably better suited than I am. But let me just briefly explain. So Miami-Dade County has got what they call the SMART plan, and their priorities. Miami-Dade County TPO, which is the Transportation Planning Authority, has shifted priorities from roadway building to rapid transit. So they've developed, I think it's a $6 or $9 billion countywide effort to insert rapid transit into its 6 major corridors. One of the major corridors is the South Corridor. It goes from Dadeland to Florida City. The project that was approved, there were choices that we've wrangled around with for 40 years, really. Metro Rail initially was supposed to extend all the way down to Florida City, and it didn't come. And the reason it didn't come, it wasn't affordable. The federal government wouldn't give us the dollars for it. So we've wrangled around for the last 40 years, and finally, a couple years ago, we were given the choice of Metro Rail or bus rapid transit. Technically, the differences aren't that great relative to speed, travel time, those types of things. We got bus rapid transit. It's a $300 million project, $100 million from the county, $100 million from the state, and $100 million from the federal government, and it's being constructed right now at 12 stations from Dadeland to Florida City. It will have it will run on 7 to 15 minute headways, meaning the time in between buses of that. It will have basically a capacity of over 30,000 riders a day. Its travel time is only minutes slower than Metro Rail. There is not the capacity for Metro Rail. One of the issues that why the Village of Pinecrest supported bus rapid transit along with Homestead is the fact that it means less density. Metro Rail, if you're going to fund Metro Rail through federal formulas, the way you fund it is with density parallel to Dadeland. They want you to have 250 units an acre. You need a lot of people in the half a mile around the station. With bus rapid transit, you need significantly less people around the stations. I think that when we argued amongst ourselves as South Dade elected officials, the argument that people would say, we want Metro Rail, and I would say, no, you don't want Metro Rail, because Metro Rail means high density. And that's been proven out in the last couple of months with the rapid transit corridor. No city but Cutler Bay and South Dade really wants Metro Rail. Cutler Bay went through this exercise 15 years ago and took their Southland Mall area and made it legally, land use and zoning wise, look like Dadeland, 250 units an acre, 17-story average. That's not appropriate for Pinecrest. We would not want to see that. We don't want to see the 125, I don't think. And I think we're talking a much lower scale. So thank goodness we didn't get the metro system. But the point is that there's no new roads going to be built in Miami-Dade County. The abatement of traffic is going to come through the rail. The ridership on the busway isn't significant at this point in time, and it's not significant because nobody lives near the busway, right? Ridership comes from people in close proximity. And again, there's a million more people moving to South Dade in the next 20 years. They have to go somewhere. And if they all go in single-family homes, they won't ride the rapid transit, and they will clog the existing roadway network because it's not going to get any bigger. And so the thought that this county has is, to some extent, put them in the station areas. The objective, the hard thing that we have, is how do you put them in the station areas appropriate for the Village of Pinecrest? It's totally different than what they may want to see across the street. It's not a 250 unit an acre type of thing. It's we were tinkering around with 25 or 30 units an acre. Again, that's the very bottom of rapid transit supportive type of development. The other issue is, can you get better design? I mean, I don't think, nobody wants to see a building covering the entire footage, the area of a lot. How do you get the highest quality design? I think you guys are experts at this. I thought that giving flexibility in height pulls things off of the ground floor and gives you a better design. But that, you're going to explore that. Mr. McDonald knows a lot more about the BRT.
Thank you, Joe. Yes. I served on Pinecrest Council for 8 years, and I was chair of the League of Cities Transportation Committee, and also I chaired the National League of Cities Transportation Committee. So your question is a good one, and that's why you guys are here. That's why the village is doing this, visioning. 10 years ago we did it, now we're doing it again, because what you're going to get here in about a year and a half is a BRT system that is probably going to be the gold standard for the nation. 20 miles of bus rapid transit. What that really means is you're going to see something totally different out here on what is now the busway. You don't see too much yet, but they're building air-conditioned stations along the way. There are going to be, I believe, 12 of them. These are going to be, see, BRT is really light rail on rubber wheels. I don't know exactly what the vehicles are going to look like, but they're going to be different than your normal bus. And when the vehicle comes into an air-conditioned station, which one of them will be right down here on 136th Street, you will prepay, just like going on Metro Rail. You'll go into this air-conditioned station, you prepay, then you walk out onto the platform. The bus will come in, the vehicle will come in, just like Metro Rail. 2 doors are going to open, so people board without paying their fare at the front of the vehicle. So from Homestead to downtown Miami, including a change at Dadeland South, it'll take about an hour for people to travel from 20 to 30 miles. So it's going to be a game changer. And you're right, nobody's riding the bus too much today. But when this system comes in, people, especially in Cutler Bay, Palmetto Bay, Homestead, Fort City, people are going to ride it because they have a choice. They'll have a choice. Do you want to spend an hour taking rapid transit, or do you want to spend 2 or more hours in your car? How will that impact here? Well, and this is what ties in with what Joe's saying and others. The county the county's objective is to increase density along the Metro Rail, along the busway. And so that's what you're doing, what the village has been doing. How do we adjust our zoning to accommodate the future? And that's what we're really talking about. Yes.
I understood that the way this long bus with a lot of people is going to get faster in the same route they take now is that the lights are going to change when the bus is coming. Basically, the bus is going to be always in green, and they're going to go through. So in the capital of the country where I come from, which is Bogota, Colombia, in the hours that everybody wants to drive to downtown, then part of the same street, everybody goes in that direction. So if that lanes of the bus I never see a lot of people over there, if there could be cars also riding along with the bus, like ambulance chasers, and then we would get less traffic in Pinecrest and more traffic over there. That's possible?
Well, okay, I'll give you some bad news. That was already talked about, thought about, and analyzed. The BRT system was being talked about for the past 10 years. So that'll never be. They're never going to have, because the studies, if you increase the number of lanes in traffic, you don't reduce traffic, it fills the void. So that's not going to happen. But what will happen is, especially people from Deep South A, I don't see Pinecrest people using BRT a lot. For people in Pinecrest to go west on 136, to get on a rapid transit bus and then go north, just as easy to go straight up. So I don't see that happening.
They will go south.
They will go south. People will go south when they redevelop, and they are going to redevelop Southland Mall. That whole, as Joe mentioned, they're doing a lot down there. So the BRT is not for today; it's for the future. And as Joe said, it's the county and the feds total of $300 million. So it's going to have an impact. You're not going to see it tomorrow. The other thing about the lights too, gantries are going to come down, gates are going to come down. So when that vehicle is moving north or south, when they're approaching the intersection, the major ones, gates go down, these things go through. So it's been well thought out. And as I said, I've studied this stuff around the country, and we're going to have a really unique mass transit going down here at a price tag that's paid for. So that's what all this is about. We're just looking at our little strip of Pinecrest on the east side. And as the consultant that pointed out, and Joe, we're not talking about going deep into Pinecrest. It's all about the US1. And really, it's about the nodes. And then as Steve can tell you, when I was on council, and maybe you guys will talk about this, well, Steve's going to mention it to you. You know, what else can we do along US1 to create some form of downtown? Well, one of the things we did a few years ago, 5 years ago, whatever, we brought all the landlords together from Sunnyland South, you know, where Whole Foods, Milam's and CVS and all that. That's an old strip mall. It's been around for what, 50, 60 years? So we brought all the landlords, and there are different landlords along the way. It's not one big developer. It's one bunch of them. We brought them into the conference room at the Village Hall and said, okay, how about we think about creating a Main Street Pinecrest? Let's put some form of maybe 2 or 3, 4-story building along the highway, shops down below, maybe some parking somewhere, maybe residences above, apartments above, and then create a Main Street on the west side, and then reconfigure the strip mall where Best Buy is and all that stuff, and then have a Main Street where people can ride bikes, walk around, have something like that. Well, it didn't fly. But maybe when you guys are looking at what you can do, that's something to be thinking about. So you've got a great job to come up with some ideas, because you're all professionals, and to make some suggestions to the council. Again, and the thing is, again, one last point. All we're doing is, not we anymore, what they're doing is a vision plan. Nothing happens along the highway unless some developer comes in and somebody wants to sell, and all the council is doing is changing the zoning to accommodate things in the future should a developer want to come in and do something. It's much better to have the zoning, it's already zoned commercial, so just to tweak it a bit. So if someone comes in and says, I want to build something here, then we're ready to go. So,
thank you for broadening this somewhat to give us the bigger picture of how this all comes together. No, in regards to your commentary about traffic flows. Right? Melissa, this goes to your group, no? In our presentations, I'm certain that transportation is going to be huge in the discussion as to quantities of people moving through our little forced Main Street here in front of 100, through 104th to 136, and this transformation. Will you guys be studying traffic and the quantities of cars that would be coming through here, or is that Mayor, is that part of their?
I would say as a part of this effort, we will not be conducting a full-fledged traffic analysis. That's not part of the scope. Okay. But what I would say that as we start to look at these districts and understand what sort of development could have there, we will be looking at level of service at a minimum to make sure that we're not infringing on that. But we won't be doing any detailed trip counts analysis like that. That's not part of this effort at this time.
So I think we're going to sort of at some point figure out how to get a sense of what I think Victoria was talking about a little bit in regards to the flows of. It's very inspiring how you've spoken about us being the gold standard, because I think that we will be the gold standard, all right? And the notion of what Victoria was saying about the buses and how they move and these sort of these turnstile kind of devices that come down really very quickly and let cars go and that kind of thing, and how that moves. But I think it's going to be really important to also sort of explain that there isn't, if there is, they're going to, this is sort of controlling expectations, of course. So we're going to have to know how these things are going to maybe slow things down heading in the, perpendicular, no? When these trains or not trains, but these buses are traveling. So we're going to have to figure that out, how have some metrics of the volume of cars moving through. And that I think is going to be, if we don't have that programmed in our strategy here, we should start already looking at how we're going to include that into our dialogue and our conversation.
I think that we might be I think maybe going to be more general than that specific.
No, I think that we're going to need that based on that last meeting. Said that people are going to, they're very concerned about traffic at 104th and 136th, and so we're not going to be able to dodge that by beautiful renderings.
No, right.
So
I think that has to come from the county that's leading the study. So we can go back to them to get that analysis, because I think that should have been done.
And I think that we need to get that research information.
Yeah.
That research information so we can all get it. Or platter, you know what it means.
Yeah.
We can analyze what it represents.
Right.
And if there's a hang up on there, how to design that into our scheme, kind of like that Main Street idea that you were having before. You know.
I think what we can influence is how people and cars interact, at those intersections, and really think about what those stations look like. What does the development look like around those stations? And start to think about focusing the development there, because I know the county has this vision of this linear, like a linear development, and is that something that makes sense, or is it, is the alternative, which is kind of looking at these little centers and densifying and kind of building up those centers, so you're preserving the space in between. So what is the, what is the vision of that? So how does Pinecrest and Pinecrest's future kind of interface with these things that are planned that are going to happen? So I don't know how much influence we have over the traffic necessarily and the way that the system is designed, but we can influence the development around it and how it looks and how much or how little we want.
So I have maybe it's a question for the mayor, but Miami-Dade County owns pretty much all the land from South Miami on the west side of US1 all the way down to Homestead, if I'm not mistaken. There may be something in there. Why are they? Why is the county not develop their side of the US1 corridor, and what is their interest in forcing Pinecrest to be a part of these nodes necessarily?
Yeah, and there's a few big lots that are empty right now, but what's going in with in those lots?
So they don't own the land, but they're in charge. The land is in their jurisdiction.
This in Pinecrest?
Well, on the west side of the county, so the county owns very little land altogether.
But all of that is all of it is in Dade County.
It's in Dade County, so it's owned by private property owners,
correct.
And those property owners then do whatever. So the government's job in land use and zoning is to set the rules for development. And that's what they've done in their area, that's what we're trying to do here. Now the county set the rules. The county's had long-standing policy since the 70s, Eastward Ho, we were talking about earlier, which is to put much of the growth that happens in the future along the transportation corridors. And our growth management policy was to not be like Broward and spread the houses all the way out to the Everglades. We have a urban development boundary that's meant to move, but when certain criteria thresholds are met. And so over time, that's been their policy. And so in 2017, they decided that to fund rapid transit in most of the corridors, and along with the need for affordable housing, the need to protect the environment, the need to stimulate economic development, the need to protect the Everglades, protect the Bay, those types of things, they decided that they were going to put a rapid transit zone land use in place along the transportation corridors in the county. And that said, like I mentioned earlier, at the stations, at the places like Dadeland, the larger stations, 250 units an acre, 25 stories. At the smaller stations, 125 units an acre, 16 stories. And in between the stations, 60 units an acre. And that would go out half a mile from the corridor. That only existed in the county, in the unincorporated areas. The latest attempt was to get that to exist in the incorporated areas. And so it's a multiple faceted approach. One is to concentrate the growth because you can get more affordable, get more reasonably priced housing. It's not as expensive to supply water, sewer, infrastructure to those things. I think schools are generally in place. Protect the environment so you're not building out onto the agricultural land or environmentally sensitive land with drainage, those types of things. But also to fund rapid transit, because the federal formulas for funding rapid transit are primarily based around ridership, which is only counted when you look at a half a mile around your stations. So when you look at most of Miami-Dade County, a half a mile around the station areas, outside of the city of Miami, there is very low density, a planned density. It doesn't mean that it exists. So for instance, before they made those rules, it's all commercial on the west side. If you do a circle around the area, there are no necessarily residents. There are no riders because it's all the falls is all a mall. It doesn't have, it's not a mixed use. It doesn't have residents. The only residents are like Pinecrest single family homes. So that doesn't support ridership. When they transfer to mixed use, right, and they give it a density, then the federal government says, oh, in your circle, you've got 500 acres in a circular mile, and you've got up to 125 units an acre, and that gives them a density which converts in a federal formula to ridership, and that's one of their goals when it comes to transit, to doing that.
So I understand, and I'm working on 2 projects, for example, right now that are on the west side of the busway that are designed exactly for that reason, to provide workforce housing and affordable housing and a density higher. There's one down in what used to be Perrine, and I'm doing one down in Homestead. But my question is, why, if the county has the property, or they have the control of the properties along the west side, and there's a bunch of other large parcels, that are sort of empty on the other side, why does it have to be a circle that goes across the highway? Because even the highway is also it's a barrier. I don't see, there's not too many people that cross the street anywhere across the length of Pinecrest.
Well, that's what we argued. We argued the point that the circle was great from a textbook point of view, but when you try to apply the circle in real time, it doesn't work. And if you start to, I just want to use the example of the 136th Street station. If you drew a circle around there, and you're putting the circle largely on single-family houses, which we feel it's totally inappropriate to rezone a single-family home to that. So my theory was, if you want to apply it in real time, you draw an irregularly shaped boundary based on the land uses where it should be. Exactly. And so you would, again, it goes to my thought of, you take if you've got a map of that area, Melissa, you see the aerial will come up. You see that, you clearly see the aerial has a commercial area and a residential area, and there you can see it here. And the interesting part of it was, in my opinion, if you were to make the west side or the east side of the commercial area the boundary for your station area, right? You don't go like this with a circle. You go, that's the area that we would do. And instead of sacrificing the single family homes, you would say, we'll push whatever residential you want into there. And so suppose they want whatever number of units, you just say, okay, we're not, the trade-off is you interfere with the single family home. So the county acquiesced to that request. They allowed us now to exempt all the single family homes for our district. So we can draw an irregularly shaped district in all the commercial areas and not interfere with the single family home. So that's going to become law probably this summer, which forever takes that half a mile strip out of concern. So thousands of homes that were at risk in Pinecrest before of being invaded by the county with this crazy density will no longer be great. We don't have to, I don't know what, from a planning perspective, what you guys want to do or recommend is probably we have to have a holistic conversation about densities, heights, intensities. The only thing the county asks us to do now, they don't make us conform to a density standard. So that's off the wall. We could do 1 unit an acre, or we could do 5,000 units an acre. They don't make us conform to a height standard. They want us to have an FAR, right? So in the first quarter mile around the station, which would be 136th Street, kind of where Melissa's dot is, would be 1.5 FAR. And in the second quarter mile out, they would want up down to 0.5 FAR. And again, it would be irregular. You would never go out the half a mile because we would naturally exempt all single family and 2-family home sections from our triangle. I hope that answers a little bit.
And I understand what you said, and I think it makes some sense. But how do you get across US1? Since we don't have a metro rail, we're not going to have. Are we going to have these bridges across?
Yeah,
like
that's
other places? Because you might increase the density where the Home Depot shopping center is. 3-4 story, whatever, houses over retail. How do those people get over to the bus?
Look, I think what Commissioner Regalato's thoughts are is, yes, that is absolutely lacking. You're right now trying to ask people to access, like transit is inaccessible in this county. It's been poorly planned, at least when you get to the station area. For a long time, there are not what we call first mile, last mile connectivities. This is, right, you got the station, but how do you get from your car to the station, or how do you get from your house to the station so you can take the train? I mean, Commissioner Regalato's thoughts are pedestrian bridges across US1 connecting the stations, much like at UM or further north in there. I mean, my thoughts were, I don't know, it's not, I mean, I think as development comes in, you would say, yeah, you could develop to whatever these things are, but unless there's a grade separated access to the transit station, you don't necessarily want residents running across US1 getting killed. So, I mean, I think you'd almost say if the government can't build you a grade separated tunnel or a bridge or something like that, the development likely doesn't work. But I think you're going to have grade separated ways to get across.
I used to use Metro Rail, the transit, the buses going to Metro Rail, and I used to cross US1 at 136 and 128. It's very risky and very scary. And I used to do this every day.
I know we talked about the possibility of having a tunnel underneath too, like in the city of Naples, for example. They have a pedestrian tunnel that crosses 41. But obviously with the water table and the expense and all that, that may or may not be practical.
Let's not preconceive what the grade change thing is going to be. I think we will get there. But back to Ronnie's idea, or where he was going with this. So on the west, on the other side that doesn't pertain to us, right? The future growth of those residential neighborhoods on that other side, are they? Because as I was driving here today, and I was looking at some of the activity that was going on, there is a hard back side to that side of the street, to that urban corridor that we would like it to be more of a miracle mile than this fast thing. So how does that neighborhood, it has its back turned to that corridor?
Those guys are at great risk because what the county has done, I think we see the commercial corridor and we see it on the aerial, you can definitely tell the commercial from the residential, right? Particularly in Pinecrest because the trees are in the residential. And so they're both hard lines, and like the walls behind your house and stuff like that, right there, they exist. The county, in its recent iteration, has said that they're keeping the half mile and they're not exempting the single family home. So the folks on the west side of the highway are under the existing regulations. It's a half a mile from the center of US1 into the neighborhoods, no matter what, if it's single family or not, doesn't matter. It's zoned 60 units an acre in between, and at the stations, the half mile circle on the county side, 125, 16-story height limit. Around Dayland, it's 250, 25-story height limit. The cities are exempt from that. So we are able to draw the hard line.
I understand, and I get that about our city.
But they're not.
But they're not.
They're not. they're great risk.
So like on 27th and US1, we were involved in that, on where the Metro Rail dives into that. That building's 23 stories, and it's 270 feet tall, right? And it turns its back on that neighborhood that's just behind it, which is it's pretty, you know, it's pretty severe. And so in this effort to plan this avenue, this world-class avenue, and the problems we have, how do we share with them what the evolution of this avenue is going to be?
Share with the guys across the highway?
Yes, so that say we come up with a spectacular set of ideas to how to develop our side, right? But the other side just is...
That's what's going to make Pinecrest unique, I think, is because, you know what, a lot of the reason why we're here is because we see what's happening on the other side of the highway, and we want to prevent that.
Right.
It's something that I think is totally disruptive to the character of those communities. And I feel that you can support rapid transit, you can have a diversity of housing stock, you can have beautiful, functional commercial centers without doing that. And so what I think that we're going to come to the conclusion is that may be 16-story buildings because we can't stop it. But when in 20 years, when you drive through here, you're going to notice Pinecrest. Oh wow, look at this beautiful low.
And I expect that is going to happen. All right, that part of it I expect is going to happen from our end of it. But my question is actually a little more Neanderthal than that. In that we're going to establish a set of rules for our side that we would like to model what the other side may or may not look like.
We're going to lead by example.
So what in this effort that we're going to create this gold standard, that this world-class street or avenue or boulevard will have an understanding that what we do over here, we anticipate. Look, we're going to go out of our way to create greatness. But on this other side, we expect you to follow. And I guess there's going to be this moment. I'm not sure how we're going to say, well, if you want us to do this, you're going to have to do this on the other side. It just can't be, you know, this urban growth that is out of control, and you know, some conditions are lined with barbed wire and chain link and stuff growing over, and you know, dark areas. Because I think, Melissa, at the end of the day, what I visualize, your drawings are going to be this profile of what a great avenue is going to look like. I hope, and that how all of these things sort of blend together. Not only our side, but the other side. No,
Right,
can I expect that from?
Yeah. So I mean, Matt might want to chime in too, but we have to decide what it is that we want to visualize. So the Pinecrest Parkway Vision Plan excluded these overlay districts. The proposal that we responded to, we were selected to, you know, to do the work for, was asking to look at those overlay districts. So it's kind of up to us to decide, do we want to look at everything? Do we just want to look at those districts and the new stations? And then what level of analysis do we want to do? I mean, obviously we are limited in scope with the budget, but yeah, we want to look at the streets, but the visualization was primarily the buildings. So if that's something that the committee wants to look at, we should discuss that and think about how that would be incorporated into the work.
I think that as we're talking about some defined half mile, so it's not going to happen on our side, which is great, right? But on the other side, more than likely it's going to happen. That as we speak to these zoning setbacks and FARs and these things, well, okay, if we just flip it on the other side, what's it going to look like? No, because I think that there's two sides to any great avenue, and that the density that happens at that urban street that, you know, like what you were saying earlier, that you go, you try to cross the street and you're running for it, right? I visualized that as a kid, and I could, you know, it gives me chills. But if there's this sense that I really want to get to the other side because it's actually very nice. Not that I'm running away from anybody, but I just really kind of want to, you know, I'd like to walk along that lined street with trees that is on the other side. And right now that's not the case, okay? It's been this abandoned hallway that nobody takes because it's hot, it's always way too sunny, and you don't know what you're going to find on the other side. So I think we need to sort of visualize the whole avenue, because we're really talking about an avenue that is not going to go away, right? It's not going to go away. So, I'm not quite sure. You said that the time frame for this is. I think we've gotten ahead of. You know, we've talked about a lot of some terrific ideas and so forth. I'm not sure what.
Yeah. Oh, for us this evening?
Yeah. You said 7.
I mean, I'm not suggesting you put off your discussion. It's been very productive, but our next meeting is going to be June 20th, and we can certainly set the agenda for that next meeting to include the presentation that Melissa and Matt will have, and anything else that you would like to include on that agenda.
Some of the information that was circulated earlier, there was a tremendous amount of traffic study because it was talking about nodes and where people were coming from to get here, you know, and like what Trader Joe's, what its arterial. So there's a ton of traffic information that exists.
We have traffic studies for different developments, and the police department has some traffic studies.
It was circulated on one of the sites, or is on one of the websites. So anyway, there is a ton of traffic information out there. And it talks about people coming here and how little, and the influx and outflux of people. Right? So that exists. So somehow maybe we refine that or recirculate that, because I mean, I went through that and I found it to be super comprehensive. I mean, way beyond anything
There are traffic studies on our website. Is that what you're referring to?
It might have been on the site when it sort of first got, you know, when the information first started going out about the rezonings and stuff like that was circulated, but it was quite in depth about the patterns and where people are coming from and going to.
And the county has a lot of that information available also. And then to answer your question with regard to development and land use patterns on the west side of Pinecrest Parkway, obviously that's not in incorporated Village of Pinecrest, but we can certainly share any recommendations and ideas and plans that you develop here with the county and those other adjoining jurisdictions. I mean,
well, my feeling when I began to read some of this report is that basically we divide the center line of US1 or the boundary of the city, and we ignore what happened on the other side. I think that this is not realistic. We need to find out what is projected from the other side, because this is going to impact. For example, let's say that in the target site they propose 4 towers of 25 stories with $250,000 square foot of retail. This is definitely going to impact our commercial area. So we need to see what is proposed, at least to have an idea what the county is planning to do.
Steve?
Yes, sir.
I'm curious, at the meetings coming up, is the public going to be able to participate with questions and like that? Because I don't have any tonight, but so they feel comfortable coming.
Yes, absolutely. And there's a spot on our agenda tonight for public questions and answers.
Thank you.
Well, there's going to be some homework that I think we're all going to have to sort of catch up the transportation information that you're talking about. Maybe that's something you could just sort of direct us to.
Yeah, I'll follow up on that, and I'll also send you the information regarding sunshine requirements.
Okay. Yes.
So,
and I think that we may be a little better prepared next time, because we'll all have we have June 20th, so we'll look at some of these things.
Yes.
And then Melissa, you're going to have a presentation for us next for that day of how to create the machinery or the methodology as to moving forward? Is that part of your role with Matt?
Right, so we're going to be developing, I don't know if you want to talk about the talking.
Yeah, that's correct. So the next step is to really develop the talking points and the communication strategy together. So we have that in a draft form that we're working for. We'll present that to you all, and we'll dive into that. And that very much opens up a lot of what the mayor has talked about tonight. So that gives you a lot of opportunities to kind of take these little silos and get clearer and clearer about it as we all kind of come together as a group. And then we'll finalize that communication strategy and talking points, and it will be distributed back through the city, the village, as well as for our use as well, right? Because we're going to go back into that outreach effort, and then we're going to use some of that information and some of those parameters, if you will, to go back through our project and back through the schedule for the next step. So that's really the heart of the matter, is this next meeting in 2 weeks.
So what would be helpful is if you all looked at the existing Pinecrest Parkway Vision Plan and kind of mark it up and share with us, you know, what you like about it, what you don't like about it, what's missing, and we can kind of overlap that with our assessment and start to kind of identify the opportunities, and then that will help with talking points, and it will kind of direct us as to what we want to do. So that when we go out into the community, we can be very specific about our intention.
So I took the liberty of putting together some notes from our last meeting, and I'm gonna share that with you.
Okay.
So maybe you could take a look at some of the things that I came up with, that I shared with the mayor. And you may have covered most of it already, right, by the time we talk. But at least you'll know my observations.
Okay.
And I believe you all already have that, so I'm gonna give this to you at the end of the meeting, and you can look at it.
Do you have an extra copy you can share, and I'll make sure that we include this on the next agenda.
And if you have ideas about how to organize these meetings, you know, if you want to do more of a workshop setting in one of the meetings, if you want us all to sit at the table together. I mean, this is very formal, so it's kind of hard to communicate. So I think as the committee, you can decide how you want the meetings to be run.
We'll definitely share that with Steve, how we can set up more of an informal pattern.
Yeah, we can set the tables up a little bit differently, and we can maybe, you know, certainly allow for public participation, but set it up in a way that fosters more discussion.
Sure.
in a less formal
format. You know, if it takes sitting on the floor like a group of Indians, all right, to get everybody to relax,
sure,
and just let the ideas sort of flow, because I think, and I said at the beginning, you know, this is going to take a village, right? We're going to all have to sort of get down and just sort of relax a little bit, and just not feel that there's sides here, okay?
Right.
And that goes for everyone, right? The objective is to get the best quality product that we can get out of it, and we have a limited time period to do it. And it's not always going to be perfect at first. We're going to have to get to the other side together, right? So, you know, if we can, you know, I don't know, but the guards in the front and so forth, I don't expect that there's going to be fireworks, or we're going to relax, right? And hopefully we can just sort of talk through these things. I can talk to my compatriots over here about stuff that we really love to do, right? And those are my 2 cents about the atmosphere. We need to work on maybe mood lighting a little bit. I'm not sure. All right, but I think that we need to. Oh yeah. Wine would be good. Wine would be good.
Well, I think as everybody gets to know each other, right, get more familiar with everybody, that hopefully will happen for sure.
Listen, I said, you know, in addition to that, we're not politicians. We're not running for anything. I don't expect to get anything out of this, and I don't think anyone here does either. All right. So with that said, I think it's kind of important for you to understand that there's an enormous amount of creativity here, especially with you folks over there, and fear will oftentimes reduce the amount of creativity that'll be expressed.
Right. Yeah.
And there are people that are public speakers here, and they want to share, and they want to enjoy the process. And nobody's trying to act really smart here, okay? Everybody's just trying to get their thoughts on the table and feel heard.
Absolutely.
So if we can just, as we do this thing, okay, and if we're going to be at this for about 6 months, right, then let's just enjoy the process.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I agree.
I have nothing else to say. We'll talk about what we do next time.
Okay, very good. I mean, so do you want to? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'll be quick. Cindy Lerner, former mayor. I served with Joe Cordino and Jim McDonald. They were on the council. When I was mayor, we went through the strategic planning together and then the visioning. And I just want to ask you to think about and consider a few additional things. You asked some really critical, pertinent, and important questions for step one. How do we go forward with this? And where are the premises that we have to rely on as we start, and you start thinking through and making recommendations? So I want to say that I have always been a proponent of trust but verify, and I'm sure everybody in this room feels the same way about Miami-Dade County, because we've been disappointed for a lifetime with Miami-Dade County, starting with the promise for the Metro Rail. I was a proponent for the Metro Rail with several of the other Southgate mayors, and realized it wasn't going to happen. There is no funding at any level for Metro Rail expansion, and we all realize that now. I do not believe what Jim believes, that we are going to get the gold standard bus rapid transit that looks sleek like Brightline or anything like that. It's going to look very much, in my opinion, just my opinion, on those buses. I do not believe that residents of Pinecrest are going to try to cross US1 to get on what I used to call hashtag no damn buses. I don't believe Pinecrest residents will use that bus system, whatever it ends up looking like. So that's part of the concerns that I have about where we go with what the county is giving us. They're putting a station on 104th Street. There's no parking being provided for that station. There is already intensity of use on 104th Street in US1 between the Whole Foods and the Target and 826, dropping everybody into that intersection. And the county has never done anything to help us with that intersection. They never will. So why are they putting a station there other than to accommodate the current intensity of use? Why should we do anything on our side of US1 and 104th is what I'm asking you. It's very narrow, a lot of different property owners who've never come and said, let me develop, redevelop or anything at 104th. 136 is a different issue completely. When I was first sworn in as mayor, back in 2009, the Spector family came to me that year with renderings. They wanted a 10-story redevelopment, and that was 2009. I said, not on my watch, it's not going to happen, and heard nothing more from them or anybody else who wanted to develop on US1. So my concern is, why even look at 104th? forth, I would suggest that not only 136th Street, but the whole North Business Overlay District and Kendall Drive, which is, what, 60 years, 70 years old, never been touched, and there's so much that could be done there as well. So I would ask that you consider that. And then somebody asked about the owners of the property. How can we furnish renderings? It seems like it's asked backwards, excuse my expression, but why would we propose renderings for a piece of property that we've never discussed with an owner who has no interest in selling or redeveloping right now? That's opposite what we typically, what anybody typically would do. It would be a developer and an owner who would come to government and say, this is what we want to do with our property. So I would urge you to make sure that any areas that are being looked at, that the owners are integrated into the conversation. And then in terms of renderings, I think part of the original presentation at one of the public meetings, there were pictures of Merrick Park. Everybody loved the idea of what we all go shop at Merrick Park, and that fits with the character of Pinecrest. So in terms of considering what is here and what isn't there. And then finally, the west side of US1, the entire time that we talked about transit-oriented development, it was personally always my impression that it would be south of, around Cutler Bay and south on the west side. The county wants transit-oriented development. That's where it should go. They have jurisdiction over it. I'm thrilled with the work that Mayor Corradino has done with the South Dade community, with the League of Cities, and with the county. I am very disappointed that our county commissioner has not come to any of the public meetings, has not sought our input as her constituents. Yes, she's had conversations with the mayor, they've gone down to the county for meetings, but we are her constituents, and she's not seeking our input. The commissioner to the south, Danielle Cohen-Higgins, just voted against the county's transit, rapid transit plan, transit-oriented plan. So just so you know that there's a lot at the county level that's being promised, a lot that's not being communicated, and a lot of questions that I hope you will continue to ask and seek input from the public as we go along, because that's been, I think, where if there were us and them feelings at past meetings, it was because there wasn't enough public dialogue and asking these kind of questions and just having open discussion. So thank you for asking, thank you for your time, and I look forward to some future meetings.
So I'd like to make one comment to something that you mentioned, and a lot of what you're saying affects all of us, so we tend to want to be more favorable to what you're saying. But I would say that in the last meeting with the residents, there were many images of that were wonderful images of the atmosphere that we would like to have, right? But what I think will happen from our process will be that when I speak to a three-dimensional rendering, I'm thinking of massing studies and geometries, and visualizing into those massing studies. If it's transformational in growth as these things extend in time, how do these massings affect the boulevard, because it really, right now, it's just a highway. But we want to somewhat transfigure it into a boulevard at the scale of La Gran Via or some international city, because let's face it, we're stuck with it, right? So we might as well make the most of it. And you know, there are these great viaducts throughout the world that you can say, wow, wouldn't it be great if it was like that? You know, something like in France or in Paris, or you say, oh yeah, I could really walk down that street, you know? And yeah, there's traffic, there's plenty of traffic, thousands of cars, but everybody wants to be there. So, but usually for those great avenues of great cities, there are sides to that avenue. And what I would like to see out of the work that you're going to do is those studies that say, well, if we set the setback back so much, and we have a row of trees, what happens? And if we set it back, the FAR a certain height, what happens? And let's face it, you go to Paris and you look at the street, the mansard roof and the profile of the building. You go to Washington, and you see some of these great avenues. They're very fitting, and people want to live there, right? So, how do we manage to create a great Gran Via, right? Where in effect, people want to move to those places, and that's the type of people we hope we can attract. Because there's the other aspect of it which we haven't spoken about, and we sort of vilify low or middle, income. But there are some people that they're looking for quality too. So how do we create an environment that people do want to invest? It's not preventing people, but to have people that want to invest and create this boulevard with us. And how do we attract people who want to do that? As opposed to just putting down a building and plunking it down, and then it doesn't add to the quality of life. So I think we have, for a Grand Avenue to be created, you have to think about both sides of how this thing comes together. And maybe the negotiation is, look, we'll do our side if you do yours.
You have more faith in the county than I do.
Well, I'm not going to say that listen, I'm optimistic. Yeah. I'm going to be optimistic. It's the first day. Right? So, I'm not going to go straight to, this is going to be a fist fight tomorrow.
Chairman, I want to say something. The mayor came up with a very good point that really maybe our recommendation turns up saying 104 is so close to Dayton and the Metro Rail. Everybody's coming from the south. They need to connect to the Metro Rail. Really, that station 104 should not be.
Yeah,
maybe that's our recommendation. 136 makes sense, but maybe 104 really. What I fear is that the cars parking in Pinecrest to be able to make the shift. That's what I fear, that people are going to park here because they don't find where to park.
If I may say something, I think these are all wonderful things, but I have a problem trying to now expand the scope of what Pinecrest is needing to do. I don't know that, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe, I don't know that it is our role to sit here and tell the county, don't put that station over there in 104th, or even, I'm having a hard time in my own head from a realistic point of view of thinking of US1 from Kendall all the way down to 136th Street as this Grand Via a la Paris, the great cities, because it isn't. There is nothing great about 3 lanes of highway going at 60 miles an hour to the south and 3 lanes coming north, and how you make that. I don't know that that's the goal of improving that. And I don't want to, maybe I'll be thrown out of this committee, but maybe we need to turn our back to US1 rather than make it our front. Because we, as the mayor said, and I think from a realistic point of view, and it's not just because Pinecrestians are not gonna go across the highway, but I don't think anybody is gonna go across the highway, along the highway from here to Homestead. So development of mass transit that has, the mass transit is on the other side of Pinecrest, it's not even, you know, in Pinecrest. Development of high intensity should be on that side.
Yeah.
Okay, and it should go along, and the county controls it, and we can say whatever we want to say to the county, but they're going to do whatever they're going to do. And maybe we need to focus, if the focus of this group is to improve Pinecrest, then let's improve Pinecrest. We can improve the look of US1, etc. But if anybody has the idea that US1 is going to turn into a great boulevard of the great cities, I don't see it, at least not in my lifetime, anyways.
But I don't think that well, I agree with you, not in your lifetime.
And maybe not even in yours.
But I anticipate that I'm going to be sticking around as long as I can. I'm just going to say that we can't, and Ronnie, I don't think we can prevent growth. We can't bottleneck it either, right? It to an extent has been a bottleneck here. That's what we have. It's a bottleneck at 104th and 136th. I live it. We live it together.
And in between.
So what we're going to be doing, I think, is consistent with what Melissa is doing. Is that, look, let's see how we can set up the set of rules, a set of rules and guidelines that will allow good quality developers to want to invest in our city and say, I'm going to lock arms with you, and I can see how this can grow over the next 40 years or 50 years. And it's going to be like every city that it develops into what it's going to be over the course of 100 years. I think that in a way, if we're going to do anything, is hopefully create a set of rules of FAR, setbacks, height limitations, anticipated styles that we can say, yeah, you know, that's coming along real well, and that this urban corridor is going to develop. But the void, which is the road, we have to improve as well.
I don't have a problem.
And I think that we're all on the same. I know that if I sat down with you and we talked about that, we're going to say, yeah, I agree with it. It's not going to be just the road, no trees, and the sidewalk's going to remain the same color and so forth. And we can start to do these crosswalk things and things. You know, do we go with a bridge underneath or a bridge over top? How do we go about doing that? I don't think that I don't have all the answers right now. I don't think none of us have. But if we can simply agree to disagree or agree on what the criteria that we know for zoning and for planning, and we establish that as a fair set of guidelines for growth over 50 to 100 years, we've accomplished something. And I think that we can do that.
No, right. I think that we can have a good plan, a really great plan, something different, something outstanding. It is a matter of putting the right concept, the right regulation, and the incentive. Because the problem here is, I have been dealing with developers for many, many years. I'm promoting growth, promoting mixed uses, promoting pedestrian-oriented development for many years. In fact, since the early 80s. My experience with growth is that it will occur in the least place that you think.
Right.
And in this case, it will take many years. I have been following the growth of rapid transit west of Brickell for the last 40 years. And the amount of development around the station is very minimum in 40 years. So I don't expect that tomorrow, and also zoning won't do anything around the development regulation. It is the market, it's a lot of things. I have changed dramatically area to 150 units per acre. For 10 years, nothing happened. So it is a lot of things going to require in order for development to happen. So I think that we can work as a group and provide you with ideas and guidance, and I think that we can come with a great plan.
So, okay, so I just want to respond to that because we're kind of getting late on time. But I think that there are tools that we can use, different types of incentives to incentivize the kind of development that we want. In terms of the design of parcels and the landscaping but what I think would be really helpful is for our next meeting and even in the interim, for you all to kind of develop, 5 or 10 points of what are the most important things for you about this project, what do you want to see out of it? And then send them to Steve, and then he can send them to us, and then we can incorporate that into our talking points so that we can have a more so we can have kind of a streamlined discussion, and we'll create an agenda for the next meeting where it's very clear with the things that we want to talk about, so we're more efficient and more detailed, and we have more productive conversations about each of the specific things that we want to address. If that makes sense, because I think there's a lot of good ideas. And now we sort of have to kind of pull them in and look at them holistically, and that would be a good exercise, I think, for next meeting.
So, Councilmember McDonald would like to speak.
This has been a great discussion tonight. My suggestion to you is to focus on the east side of the highway, Pinecrest. That's really what your job is. There's been a great discussion on rapid transit and everything else, but you hit it on, as you started talking, I don't remember your name.
Ronnie Mateo.
But yeah, your job is to work with these consultants and focus on how to make the Pinecrest commercial area from top to bottom better for all of us. You're not going to solve traffic. You're not going to solve how you get people from one side to the other. That's not really your purview. But how to make our commercial strip better for those of us who live here, and how do we anticipate the future? That's really what it's all about, because we did this 10 years ago, visioning, and as Joe mentioned, and as Steve mentioned, lots of good things. If you look at a photograph of US1 from 136 to 88, 10 years ago, and compare it today, you'll see uniformity, more uniformity of architectural design. It's just gotten better and better over the years, and that's what this group, you can do, working with the consultants to give this community the blueprint for the next, knowing that rapid transit is coming. That's going to change things in 10 years. So that's the added wrinkle that you guys have the challenge, and this lady have the challenge to work for. But anyway, thank you for listening. My turn.
Okay. Did you want to open up to other members of the public to see if there are any other comments, or? That's on the agenda.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the next item on the agenda. If you'd like, we can open up questions and answers from others that are in attendance. Yeah.
Good evening. My name's Ken Fairman. I was on the committee from 10 years ago. And it was a nice mix of residents of Pinecrest. We had, over the time that we had the meetings, we had a tremendous amount of public input, had a number of workshops. We worked with the people that kind of guided us through this, so we could kind of come up with a consensus, at least from the people that participated, on what we were hoping, not that we could make it happen, but were some guidance to what Pinecrest, what US1 corridor would look like, or what we'd like it to look like. What we didn't have that you guys have is a lot of talent in especially the areas that you have for development and architecture and planning and everything else. So I hope you look back at that old study and see that as a sort of a base to work with and put your talents to it to make it that much better. I think, and I guess eventually you'll get more public input on what, if people are still thinking those same lines of how we want it to look. And I think the general idea of having it look more natural and inviting and everything else is still going to apply. But I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys provide, and hopefully for the public input, you'll have some different renderings and different ideas for us to look at. Even when it comes to these, maybe the heights of the buildings and the positioning of the buildings and where things might happen and where they can't happen. So I'm very much looking forward to that. So thank you.
I want to thank you for your participation before and for your interest in
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yeah. I don't have to state my name, rank and serial number, right?
Serial number.
I'm Maria Hires. I've had the pleasure of meeting some of you. I'm glad that you're here. I didn't get to hear all of your discussion, but certainly you're all professional. And you all have a good vision that you're bringing to the table on how best to address the challenges that Pinecrest has. So I wanted to say, I'm happy that you guys are here. I'd like to know a little bit more about the timeline because it seems like we have pressure coming from the county with that ordinance. So I'm not clear on how that might impact some of the decisions or the timeline that you have to work with so that you can bring something to Pinecrest that we could hopefully all embrace. Do we have any clarity on that? I missed part of it.
From the county is requiring us to hand them a plan within 2 years. So there's no immediate pressure. I know there's a scope of services and a time frame on here, but from my perspective, there is no timeline for us to wrap this up. It needs to occur. We need to have everybody have their say. When we're done having our say, we'll advance it forward, and we won't stop until we're done, doing what we do here.
So the ordinance that was introduced now doesn't affect our plans for, because I know that they were.
I'll talk to you afterwards about it, but basically the ordinance leaves us alone.
Okay.
And it only requires us to do a couple things. That'll be passed probably in August. But it does. None of the pressure that we felt 2 weeks ago exists anymore. They've left it to us. They've left it to us to do.
That's good news. That's good news. And then for the
good job, Mayor. I appreciate it.
Good job.
We congratulate you that you got a step in the right direction.
Yeah, now we just have to get to Commissioner Regalado so she can be nice to the people on the website.
Commissioner Regalado is supportive of the new legislation. They'll probably modify it. She's supportive of the important parts of it, which are leaving us alone, and she's been communicating with us constantly through this process.
I think that with that, your idea of like a Gran Via, I don't think it's totally out of the realm of some measure of beautification, so that when you enter that area in either direction between 88 and 136 marks what Pinecrest is. You kind of get that feel, especially when you have to consider that there's a possibility on the west side of the highway that there might be approvals for buildings. I'm not sure how they're going to build that out, but that will still differentiate, in your eye going, if you're coming south, that your eye's going to the left. So I kind of share that same, I believe that there's
we just don't
in the realm of possibility.
We don't want to see urban sprawl on the other side. And we have this really wonderful side, and the other side is like their backs are turned to us. I think we have to recognize that just from the standpoint of scale and the swath it takes out of if you were looking from above from a plane, right, you can see it, right? So it's not going to go away. So I think we have to recognize what's going to happen on the other side to some extent. I'll just add, and I think that there was one thought that the gentleman that was with you, Mayor, the Chairman, Mr. McDonald. I just want to say that I believe in the coffee can concept, and when I do work. Right? I rather, I don't know how many of you drink Cuban coffee, but the Cuban coffee can of Bustelo, when you open it, it's usually, there's, so the only 2/3 of the way filled, right? And then so it's, when they filled it, it's settled to the bottom. That's the air that, so the converse of that is, let's fill it 1/3 over, so that when it fills it, it completes itself. So as I see it, Melissa, all right, that's the concept that I see in the work, in the body of work that you're going to do for us, is the coffee can idea. Okay, I'm gonna hope for you to fill it to the top, so that as we do look at design, all right, and we're not just going to give you 2/3. We're going to look at what happens down this avenue. What's going to happen in 20, 40 years when hopefully me and Ronnie are going to be laughing about it, you know, and saying, well, look, how about that? How about that? They didn't turn their back on us. And it takes, you know, it takes a village. We're
Right.
going to work at it, so.
But hopefully it's an incentive. I mean, hopefully there's a reconciliation. Well, it won't be exactly like La Gran Via, but just that vision
Well, at least
of
two-thirds
that
of the,
idea that
at
just.
least 2/3 of the Gran Via.
And then it's if anybody knows me, I'm really into just limited heights. Just a consideration.
Yeah, we know.
Something that we all really want.
We know.
No higher than, just so that so that it does help define
Notice that
the
I
village.
didn't say Manhattan or anything like that. It was just the
No,
stairs.
and to her,
is 4 stories.
4 stories.
and to her point about 104th Street, it, because of its proximity to Dadeland, I know that we can't do anything about with the county, but we can certainly limit development with a station like 104th, I think, because it just doesn't make sense with Dadeland being so close and that strip of land being so narrow, like what we would do there.
I don't think that this is an option. I think that the county wants to have that at 104, and I don't think that we will.
No, you won't be able
You
to
won't
stop
prevail,
it, but
right.
but on our side of Pinecrest,
Right.
that type of, what's developed there doesn't necessarily have to feed and aggravate and bottleneck even more what's there, because you've got Dadeland
Right.
to the north. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank
And thank
you,
you,
Maria.
everyone.
Thank you.
I'm John Steinbauer. I was mentioned earlier, I live next to Dadeland Plaza, right next to Dadeland Plaza. 2 things, and you've made a good point. It's not really about transit, it's about Pinecrest. I mean, it's about our village. The second thing is we need to look at whatever we come up with, not from the highway view only, but from the residents' view of the buildings or whatever is being planned. Because, and it's, as I say, it's very personal with me because I'm right next to Dadeland Plaza. I abut Dadeland Plaza. So take a look from that side, what 2 stories would look like, or 3, or hopefully no more, you know. And I think if we need residences, nice little compounds can be made in those areas around us by the station and still do what the transit is supposed to do. And thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to add something. My name is Laura Naughton. I think going back to the point of 104th Street, the reason I think it is...
Come here so that they can film you. They
Not-
can film you if you are there, standing up. You're concerned citizens?
I am a concerned citizen, and I have a lot of concerned citizens, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the ordinance, whether or not it passes. It still doesn't exclude the commercial sector. But in the meeting with the county during the week, they are open to proposals and how the proposals, because you can get exclusions at the direction of a director that they're going to put, right? At the discretion of a director. So going back to 104th Street, if it doesn't make sense because of what's existing on the west side of the highway and the congestion of traffic, it would be important to note that, because that also could be used in the presentation to the county, that it doesn't make sense, although we know it's a bus hub and they're expecting density there, right? So I don't think it's out of discussion purposes to say whether or not that makes sense. It may not make sense. And to Mr. Steinbauer's point, because his home and his neighborhood is behind the Captain's Tavern, that section of Pinecrest is currently looking at that 18-story building that you see being erected now, soon to be followed by one immediately next door. So although no one in Pinecrest expects to stop that, I think to his point, they are looking at it. So if it can be minimized or even brought up in a discussion to, you know, then I think it's important. And I think that's what his point was.
It's not Captain's Cabin, it's Dayland Plaza.
Correct, sorry, excuse me. That whole area there, if you were to go, so I think I'm a big proponent of going to see it for yourself, right? You take a field trip, because we all live in different sections. But if you were to go to his section, and look at the buffers that they have and how those buffers came into existence, I think those comments are very relevant as well, right? So for me, my area that's more impacted would be the Home Depot area. And if you go to talk to those neighbors, what are they used to seeing? Because those residents invested already knowing that they were near that commercial sector. And so they were willing to pay a lesser price home knowing that that was there. Everybody wants beautification. I'm a proponent of that. I want that. But what will they see from there, right? And I think that those are all important things, because if the county passes it, which it's, to Mayor Lerner's point, it wasn't just one commissioner that said no. The commissioner from Cutler Bay and parts of Homestead said no. So we don't know if it's a done deal. But regardless of that ordinance, then you have to think to yourself, well, if that ordinance doesn't pass, do we continue this process? And what does that mean now that we're not forced to put residential in a commercial sector, right? So I think there's a lot of things to look at, and it all is going to matter. But I think that one of the biggest things for the residents here is to maintain that height limit. And they're not used to seeing residential on this side. So I think that would be important to take that into account. Thank you.
All right, you said that you were at a meeting where this questionnaire came up, or?
Well, it's part of the ordinance.
Okay.
So it's a 65-page ordinance, a very complicated read.
Can be sent to all of us?
Yes, I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
I'm not an attorney.
So the hub, the bus hub thing.
Yes.
That there's concern about. But so staggering, so the potential of staggering that away from that location would be.
I don't think that's doable. So for sure it's coming on 104th, as the mayor was saying, and for sure on 136th. I think what my point was is that in the presentation to the county, because they're expecting an answer.
Right.
They're expecting a proposal. But I think it's realistic to include in the proposal the planned development that's coming in a 1.6 mile linear distance between that building that you see going up and Dadeland North. So why invest and congest more on 104th?
Sure, but what I'm asking you is this: you're proposing, what you're suggesting is that you get the bus hub thing there, no, but maybe not precisely there, and it slides over out of the way some, so that it's not necessarily at the location, or are you saying that it's going for sure there and
it will absolutely. It's my understanding that it will go there, but in the proposal that you have in front of you of that map, that is the overlay that the mayor is proposing to the residents. Is changing the zoning towards this slightly further north of 104th.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying is the county is expecting a proposal.
Right.
So it doesn't necessarily have to include increasing residential units at 104th, because chances are it can't handle it anyway.
Right.
So I don't think that would be outside of the ordinary to bring that up, in my opinion. But there are exclusions, and it is a very difficult ordinance to read, and you have to read it over and over again. And there are a lot of things that are discretionary, and that is why so many residents don't trust in what the county, because there are many words like except this or whereas that, and it goes on and on and on. So although when someone's giving you a summary that they're leaving us alone, maybe not, because when you really read that ordinance, it still says that the jurisdiction will fall. And why does that happen? Why does the jurisdiction fall into the county? Because these transit hubs already have jurisdictions regardless of what our zoning is. It's just never really been enforced. Right, so I think part of your statement earlier was great when you said that we are having this forced upon us. And that's what's difficult to swallow. I think when things are done in a certain way that it's presented and you can really understand it, but at the same time, we can't force landowners to do that. We don't have a strict architectural board that we're going to say, this is what you must do. So my only concern is that your ideas, and I know you're so creative, is we can't force people to build that. We just can't.
No, but you threw the, and it's a long conversation. But through establishing rules that you can look after the welfare of the developer as well, you can insert standards that can attract good growth, as opposed to, which is something that gradually has come upon us, and we've seen the success of that. And I think that people speak about Pinecrest, no? But who was going to say that the transformation of downtown Miami, with as many people has moved into there, that you could walk through downtown Miami at 11 or 12 o'clock at night and not be so concerned. And I remember taking the bus there when I was a child, when I was a teenager, and being terrified of catching the bus. No? So you know, through the efforts of Liz Platter-Zyberg and a number of urban planners that said we need to bring growth back, but we have to bring growth back, you know, with a plan that makes the thing lively all the time. There's been major improvement in many places. And I think that we just have to find a way of going about doing that we feel good about as a community, no?
I think so too, and I think it's also in your expertise of how you'll present it. I'm hoping that it'll soften the blunt behavior of the county, where they're so determined that you must build it and they will come. And the must build it is really because density equals federal dollars and federal grants. And I'm a believer that not all federal grants are good grants, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to accept these grants just because they're made available to us. It has to be the right fit. I believe in my heart, based on so many people that I talk to, that they leave Brickell and they leave Miami Beach to come here to have that rural environment, even though we're really not rural, technically. If we really analyze our agricultural zoning, no, that's not why we call it rural. People want the land. They don't want the, you know, flanking of buildings. But I feel that you'll come up with something, and I hope it'll be great. I really do.
I think I'm not quite sure how to go about sharing this thing. I'm going to tell you, look, I'll bring the gavel next time, the bottle of wine, and we'll decide which one we're going to go to. All right?
So you just, if you're ready to adjourn, you can just, somebody can make the motion to adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All in favor, say.
All right.